Throughout WWE's history, there have been so many incredible stories that were told of all time. I know I should have said that a bit differently, but you guys get the idea. Some some of the stories include the story of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, the story of the NWO and WCW, and of course the story of of the corporation, excuse me, and the Ministry of Darkness. However, 10 stories that were told so well, they became the greatest story ever told in WWE history. Now, I know that in my post on Threads yesterday, I said that it would be a top 5. I meant to say top 10, so that is that is on me. That is my mistake. But here are the top 10 greatest stories that were told in WWE history. Kicking things off at number 10 is Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa. This rivalry became the story in NXT. Two guys who were trying to just receive an opportunity in in NXT, and were given an opportunity in the first and only Cruiserweight Classic tournament in WWE. Their first round match was against each other, and they put on a hell of a show. Over time, these guys went on to become tag team champions, but the moment they lost their rematch for those tag team titles, Tommaso Ciampa got hurt and attacked Johnny Gargano in the process. Johnny Gargano went on to have such an incredible run as a singles competitor that when Tommaso Ciampa was medically cleared to compete, he went on to become NXT champion and had an incredible rivalry with Johnny Gargano. There have been multiple times where during this rivalry, Ciampa and Gargano would reunite DIY. One of those times was in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic in 2019. At that time, these two men, they did well in the first round, but in the second round, it all backfired. And Johnny Gargano saw right through Ciampa's plan and pulled the same stunt that Ciampa pulled on him at TakeOver Chicago. This rivalry escalated all the way through the pandemic, where it had to come to an end. This sparked Tommaso Ciampa getting a rematch for the NXT Championship at NXT TakeOver Portland, mere weeks after Worlds Collide, when DIY battled Mustache Mountain. At TakeOver Portland, Johnny Gargano cost Tommaso Ciampa the NXT title by helping Adam Cole retain at TakeOver Portland. This escalated to where it had to end in an abandoned warehouse that featured a actual 20x20 ring. This forced Johnny Gargano to turn heel, and the heel run actually worked. Not only did not only did Johnny Gargano's heel run actually work, but he went on to become the only 3-time NXT North American champion in history. And alongside Dexter Lumis, Austin Theory, Candice LeRae, and Indy Hartwell, Johnny Gargano formed the faction known as The Way, and it worked out pretty well to the extent where Johnny Gargano ended up turning babyface later on. And within the last few years or so, DIY has been reunited once again. And yeah, I can honestly say that that the story of Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa, it it wasn't just it wasn't just any rivalry in NXT. It was the rivalry. It was it was a clear case of of the old adage, best of the old adage, the best of friends can make the bitterest of enemies. And and the story of DIY was the exact proof. Yes, there have been times where DIY made several appearances in NXT. Take what about a month and a half ago, for example, they came DIY returned for a match at NXT Homecoming against the Trick Mello Gang, Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes, in an incredible tag team matchup. I will say that it will happen again where DIY could potentially go their separate ways and beat the hell out of each other again, because those two men define the definition of the chant "Fight Forever." Will we ever see the match happen again? Absolutely. But as far as when, only time will tell. Coming in at number 9, speaking of of matchups being the rivalry, John Cena versus Randy Orton. There is no denying that these two guys were cut from the exact same cloth. Both men started their careers professionally in the WWE developmental brand known as OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, and they went on to have stellar careers. They both started their careers in WWE on SmackDown in the summer of 2002. And from that point forward, both of their careers have been parallel to one another. Randy Orton has went on to win 14 world championships in WWE, at least five or six tag team titles, two Royal Rumble victories, Money in the Bank, multiple WrestleMania main events, and of course, Intercontinental Champion and United States Champion. John Cena, on the other hand, has had a career much different, because not only did John Cena become a 5-time U.S. champion, he also went on to win two Royal Rumble matches. He's won at least a dozen WrestleMania matches throughout his entire career. He's won Money in the Bank. He's won 4 tag team titles. He's won a record-breaking and now record-setting 17 world titles, and is now the Intercontinental Champion. These two men have fought against each other more times than I give a fuck to count, but they've also teamed up together as well on several occasions in the past. One of the most notable times that they teamed up came about in 2008 on Monday Night Raw on the road to WrestleMania 24, when Triple H forced Randy Orton and John Cena to team up to take on damn near the entire Monday Night Raw roster, which featured guys like Hardcore Holly, Cody Rhodes, a younger version of Cody Rhodes, WWE Hall of Famer now Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Val Venus, the Highlanders, and of course Santino Marella, just to name a few. Triple H forced them to team up, where the rule was that if one of them stabs the other in the back, that person would be out of WrestleMania. and they did not disappoint. I can guarantee you that right now. Aside from that, one of the most instant classic matches that they ever had throughout the entire rivalry came about in 2013 at a pay-per-view called TLC, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, where WWE decided to unify both the World Heavyweight title and the WWE title to create the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, to which it would be contested in a TLC match. Randy Orton went on to become the first ever WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And from that point forward, John Cena and Randy Orton had several other matches against each other, including their last encounter came about at Backlash earlier this year in St. Louis, Randy's hometown, for the undisputed WWE title, and it was truly an instant classic. Arguably one of the greatest stories ever told. Two guys from OVW who get called up to WWE and went on to have won multiple world titles because their accolades, their skill sets in the ring are basically two sides of the exact same coin. I will say one of the biggest takeaways from the rivalry of John Cena versus Randy Orton is the fact that with this retirement tour that John Cena has been on this entire year, is that John Cena, and this was something that I had seen in a post on Facebook earlier this morning. Apparently many people believe John Cena never should have turned heel. If anything, he should have remained babyface and had defeated Cody Rhodes, forcing Cody to turn heel. I feel like that could have been a really good way for the match of Orton versus Cena to that would have really have been such an instant classic. But even with R-Truth getting involved and obviously multiple WWE officials getting involved and shit, this matchup that matchup at Backlash was truly an instant classic, and it was one of the greatest. It was literally one of the best matches of the entire night, aside from the Fatal 4-Way for the United States title. Again, one of the biggest takeaways from this rivalry was the fact that during this retirement tour, this was actually the first time in a long time that John Cena would ever have used underhanded tactics to retain the WWE title. We had not seen that happen since he was the Doctor of Thugonomics back in like 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. Which again, that was the only time he was ever a heel. From the time WWE had turned to John Cena babyface up until now, aside from the heel run that he had this year, John Cena was always a babyface and never, not once, used underhanded tactics. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from that rivalry. But I will say that this was definitely one of the best rivalries we had ever seen in a long time, because again, they were in so many different matchups over the years. Last Man Standing, TLC, Iron Man, Hell in a Cell, Steel Cage matches, Royal Rumbles. They've been through literally everything against one another. Definitely deserves to be in this top 10. Coming in at number 8 is WWF versus The Alliance. Now you're probably wondering, Why this? Well, this ended up becoming known as the Monday Night Wars. The Monday Night Wars started back in around 1996, 1997, when WCW decided to air their episodes of Monday Nitro live on TNN, on TNN or TNT. I think TNT. Where Eric Bischoff had in the eyes of some people stole WWF talent. Guys like Lex Luger, the $1 Million Man, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, God rest his soul, Kevin Nash, Sean Waltman, aka X Pac, Bret Hart, guys like who else can I name? Macho Man Randy Savage, God rest his soul. Just to name a few. Bret Hart, just to name some, and for the first, I want to say close to half of the Monday Night Wars, WCW took over the ratings. But once WWE started to get a grasp of what they needed to do, WWF basically just took over. They completely took over the ratings, and once guys like Eddie Guerrero, guys like Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, guys like Chris Jericho, just to name a few, X-Pac, once they all left WCW for WWE, WCW's ratings kept getting lower and lower and lower and lower because they couldn't come up with something new. And it all had to do with the fact that they lost guys like Bret Hart, Goldberg, and pretty much the entire NWO, because the NWO was the reason why WCW was winning the ratings during the Monday Night Wars. However, in 2001, we all thought that the rivalry had come to an end after Vince McMahon purchased WCW. Nope. Wrong, sir, because it was Shane McMahon that bought out WCW, and the Monday Night Wars continued with an invasion. You heard me right, an invasion. And this invasion escalated to where there were multiple heel turns throughout the entire process. Christian turned heel, Kurt Angle turned heel, Stone Cold Steve Austin turned heel. Who else? The Dudley Boys turned heel. Rob Van Dam turned heel. Although, to be fair, Rob Van Dam was more of a fan favorite than a heel, so it was kind of awkward, to say the very least. Test turned heel. God rest his soul. Just to name a few, they all turned heel, but the rivalry came to an end at one show, Survivor Series, the one match that would decide everything. The traditional Survivor Series elimination. Team WWF versus Team Alliance. The Alliance featured Shane McMahon, Booker T, Kurt Angle, Rob Van Dam, the hardcore champion at the time, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, the WWE champion at the time. On Team WWF, you had The Big Show, Kane, The Undertaker, Chris Jericho, and The Rock, who was the WCW champion at the time. And it came down to the final two, Rock and Austin. Kurt Angle turned on Austin, Jericho turned on The Rock, but it all worked out in the end because The Rock hit Austin with a rock bottom, thus destroying WCW and ECW in the process. Obviously for ECW, it came back full time in 2006, which lasted until 2010, but that is neither here nor there. I will say that this was one of the greatest stories ever told, because this was more, not only was this a personal matter for WWE, but it was also a professional level as well. A professional matter as well, because and also too a business matter as well, because not only did Vince not take it lightly of WCW winning the ratings, but he was the one that started to bring up, fresher and fresher rivalries that became great. Rivalries that include the Corporation versus the Ministry of Darkness, The Rock versus the McMahon Helmsley regime, just to name some. And what got WWE to win the ratings was actually a rivalry that is actually number 7 on this list. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. Everyone knows that Stone Cold Steve Austin was the rebellious babyface that nobody expected. Nobody expected Stone Cold Steve Austin to be the guy in WWE throughout the entire Attitude Era. And sure shit, he was that guy. Winning 6, you heard me right, 6 WWE titles, multiple tag team titles, multiple intercontinental championships, but also Stone Cold Steve Austin is still to this day is the only person in WWE. Actually, again, think about this. Stone Cold Steve Austin is the only person still to this day that has won 3 Royal Rumble matches. 1997, 1998, 2001. No one else has ever done that. But keep in mind, Cody Rhodes has became the first person in a quarter of a century to win back-to-back Royal Rumbles. The last person to do it was obviously Stone Cold Steve Austin. The reason why Austin became so rebellious and had won and had acquired all those accolades was because Vince McMahon did not want Austin to be the guy. He wanted guys like The Rock and guys like Triple H and guys like The Undertaker to be the guy, but it was always Stone Cold Steve Austin. And what ended the rivalry completely was what ended the Attitude Era. What ended the Attitude Era was WrestleMania 17. The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE title at WrestleMania 17. The match ended. Austin becomes champion. Vince and Austin shook hands. You heard me right. Stone Cold Steve Austin shook hands with Vince McMahon. To which the very next night on Raw, Stone Cold and Triple H formed the 2-man power trip. Arguably one of the most dangerous tag teams in WWE, which was what ended the Attitude Era. I will say that rivalry sparked so much controversy from not from a personal standpoint or a professional standpoint, but more from a business standpoint. Because Linda McMahon, at one point during the rivalry, stepped down as CEO of WWE, and handpicked her successor. That successor being Stone Cold Steve Austin. And yeah, sure, the things that they did were a bit unorthodox, but some of those things made sense. But what truly ended ended the rivalry was Vince McMahon inducting Stone Cold Steve Austin into the WWE Hall of Fame. Would I consider this to be part of the Mount Rushmore of the greatest stories ever told? 100%, absolutely. But if you thought that rivalry was crazy, this one coming in at number 6 might just take it. The story of one of the greatest factions of the modern era in WWE. You heard me right. They are known as the Shield. A group formed from NXT. 3 men: Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns. 3 guys who fought each other multiple times in FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling. Worked at NXT to where they teamed up together in NXT, debuted on the main roster as CM Punk's hired guns to ensure that he would retain the WWE title. Once CM Punk dropped the title, the Shield basically went on to do their own bullshit. Excuse me, and what I mean by that is Dean Ambrose went on to have a legendary run as United States champion, whereas opposed to Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, they went on to become WWE Tag Team Champions. The Shield became one of the most dominant factions in all of WWE, and they were on top of the world. But it all came to an end the night after Payback in 2014. The chair shot heard all over the world. Seth Rollins stabbing Ambrose and Reigns in the back, to which all 3 went their separate ways. Not only did all 3 went on to become world champion, they all went on to become Grand Slam champions as well. However, Roman Reigns had become the only person in the Shield to have a legendary run as WWE champion, holding on to the title for 1,316 days, where as opposed to Seth Rollins, he became the first ever World Heavyweight Champion. I will say that there had been multiple times where yes, the Shield would reunite, which was obviously in 2018 and in 2019. But every time fans would see Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins in the ring at the exact same time, it always sparks the question, are we going to see them reunite again? And the answer is no. Let's just be real, we will never see them reunite again. It will, I think for both those men, the day that happens probably would be the day that would probably be the day that we would see Dominic Mysterio admit his mistakes to his own father, Rey Mysterio. And ironically enough, they both have one thing in common. Neither of those things is ever going to happen. But the Shield was a very dominant faction because of the fact that they always used the tactic of divide and conquer. Split up, take everyone out, and go for the odd man out. That was always the MO of the Shield, and it worked out on multiple occasions. So much so that many fans believe that the Shield as a faction should be in the WWE Hall of Fame someday, and I completely agree. I completely agree, but we will have to wait and see. Coming in at number 5 is actually another notorious rivalry that sparked a lot of controversy for all the reasons you would expect. Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. A a a rivalry that started out as two men chasing the Intercontinental Championship escalated to where WrestleMania 12 featured the Ultimate Instant Classic, the first ever 60-minute Iron Man match, and it ended in Montreal, Quebec, Survivor Series 1997, in the infamous Montreal Screwjob. Multiple sources claimed that WWE offered Bret Hart a 20-year deal with WWE, which would mean that he would be making more money than any other person that worked for WWE at that time. Bret Hart declined the offer and chose to defect to WCW. This sparked a match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker at In Your House Bad Blood in 1997. The very first ever Hell in a Cell match. The winner would go on to Survivor Series and would challenge Bret Hart for the WWE title. Obviously, because of the long-awaited, anticipated debut of Kane attacking The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels pinned The Undertaker and went on to Survivor Series to compete against Bret Hart for said WWE title. And at the time, Bret Hart was indeed the champion. And what sparked the controversy was the ending. Shawn Michaels puts Bret Hart in the sharpshooter, and the ref was just like, you know what, fuck this, ring the bell. And still to this day, that matchup has been dubbed the Montreal Screwjob, and it's one of the most notorious matches in professional wrestling history. There was another Screwjob in ECW, the infamous Philadelphia Screwjob between Rob Van Dam and The Big Show over the ECW Championship, all thanks to Paul Heyman, but that is neither here nor there. What ended the rivalry between the two men was two things. Number one is the fact that Bret Hart wanted to become, he literally was the bigger man. So WWE fans begged Vince to bring Bret Hart back to Raw as the guest host, meaning that he would run Monday Night Raw and do his own thing. And that's exactly what happened. He guest hosted Raw and demanded that Shawn Michaels come into the ring so they can meet face to face. And they both reconciled. They embrace one another, and they essentially became friends. However, Vince, on the other hand, wanted nothing to do with it, and told Bret, "You deserve to be screwed." This led to a match between both Bret and Vince at WrestleMania, with the entire Hart family at ringside, with one of the members of the Hart family being the guest referee. However, for Vince, it completely backfired on Vince, as Bret Hart told Vince that the family is stronger than ever before, and Vince lost. Which again was what ended the rivalry of Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart. Coming in at number 4, speaking of Kane and The Undertaker, the Brothers of Destruction. Again, one of the greatest stories. Another story that was told so great, it can never, ever be duplicated. Obviously yes, we've had the story of Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy, and Jey Uso versus Jimmy Uso, but all three of those rivalries pale in comparison to the rivalry of the Brothers of Destruction, because Kane and the Undertaker had been through wars together and against each other. Inferno matches, Hell in a Cell, you name it, they've been a part of everything. And Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, even admitted it on, during his Hall of Fame speech, that it is indeed one of the greatest stories ever told. The story of how the older brother, The Undertaker, was being accused of burning his parents and his brother. Which, when Kane showed up, we all know. Both Kane and The Undertaker had teamed up together on numerous occasions. They've been in battles with one another. And the last time that these two men had battled each other, it was all the way back in 2010. Right around this time, 15 years ago, in a Buried Alive match. Yeah. But the last time that these two teamed up together, it was back in 2018. 8 years later. Crown Jewel, DX versus the Brothers of Destruction. Arguably one of the worst matches ever in WWE history. What made this story so great was the clear case of even though brothers can divide each other every now and then, they always stick together. That was what made this rivalry so fucking good. And if I'm being honest, these final three will definitely top the Brothers of Destruction, because coming in at number 3 is the Undisputed Era. Arguably one of the greatest factions in NXT history. 4 men: Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, and Adam Cole, baby. 4 men who competed on the independent scene for so many years, made it big in WWE, in NXT, and had fulfilled the undisputed prophecy in 2019. Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly went on to become NXT Tag Team champions for, I believe, a second time in their careers. In their careers as a team. Roderick Strong went on to become the NXT North American Champion, and it may have taken a few years, but Adam Cole became NXT Champion, holding on to the title for 403 days, making that reign the longest ever. No one could ever match that, ever. I highly doubt Braun Breaker ever could have, to be fair. What made this story so good was during the pandemic, when all the members of the UE turned babyface. Kind of crazy how a guy like Adam Cole could be a babyface when throughout his whole career he was always a heel. They competed inside War Games against Team McAfee as babyfaces. But what caused Adam Cole to turn heel was the fact that Kyle O'Reilly had a match with Finn Balor for the NXT title. And what ended this story was the match between Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole. at NXT TakeOver 36 in a 2 out of 3 falls match, to which Kyle O'Reilly ended up winning the whole matchup in the end. However, WWE was interested in keeping Adam Cole, and the condition was that Adam Cole had to give up his Twitch page, to which Adam Cole refused. So WWE chose to not sign a new deal with Adam Cole. And now all four men have been doing their own thing outside of WWE. In fact, Bobby Fish has been traveling the world, competing on the independent scene here and there. But from what I've been seeing on social media, it seems like he's been doing a lot of meet and greets, to say the very least. I will say that this was such a good faction. This was indeed one of the greatest factions ever in NXT history, because every single person that those men had encountered in NXT, they've been inside war games against guys like Pete Dunne, Pat McAfee, Ricochet, the War Raiders, Danny Burch, Oni Lorcan, who else can I name? The Authors of Pain, Sanity, just to name a few. Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Dijak, all those guys that the Undisputed Era had been in the ring with, they've been inside war games with as well. So what made these guys so good was just the fact that they had been in the ring against each other more times than we give a fuck to count, and that was what they start. That was when they started to become more than friends. They became brothers, and that was what the Undisputed Era was all about: brothers in arms, fighting for the exact same goal, to make NXT a better place, and they did that. Because of the Undisputed Era, NXT now has been 10 times red hot than it's ever been before, and it's all thanks to the Undisputed Era. But coming in at number 2, The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. So if you guys remember earlier on in this video, I talked about the Monday Night Wars and Rock versus Austin, Austin versus McMahon. Rock versus Austin was another rivalry that was a great story told, because again, both guys were rebellious babyfaces fighting against the system. But what made this rivalry so good was the fact that throughout the entire rivalry, during the early stages of the rivalry, The Rock was a part of two factions: the Nation of Domination and the Corporation. When The Rock was a part of the Nation, he chased after the Intercontinental Championship. When he was a part of the Corporation, he chased after the WWE title and became champion in the process. The rivalry continued from going after the Intercontinental Championship to main eventing WrestleMania 15 in Philly, which became one of the worst WrestleManias of all time for weird ass reasons. Over time, both these men had teamed up together. They've been in wars against one another, and it escalated, and it came to an end at WrestleMania 19, 2003, Safeco Field, Seattle, Washington. The Rock never was able to defeat Stone Cold at WrestleMania until that exact night. After that night, they ended up becoming more than friends outside of WWE. They became brothers in arms. And even though Stone Cold is a WWE Hall of Famer now, two-time Hall of Famer actually, The Rock has been veered as one of the greatest storytellers ever in WWE. But if you thought that was a great story, wait until you hear about the number one spot. You guessed it, the number one spot, the Bloodline. Do I mean do I even have to say it? I mean, this started when Roman Reigns came back to WWE during the pandemic, literally midway through the pandemic era of WWE, becoming Universal Champion, which sparked his legendary run as champion. Jey Uso ends up being forced to join with Roman. Jimmy Uso gets involved. Paul Heyman gets involved in the process. Solo gets involved. Sami Zayn gets involved. The Bloodline becomes whole. Solo becoming the Bloodline's enforcer. Sami Zayn, the honorary Uso. Paul Heyman, the wise man. The special counsel and the wise man to the Bloodline. Roman Reigns, the WWE champion, well, the undisputed champion, but you guys get the idea. The Usos, the undisputed tag team champions. That was peak. When that was happening, that was right here, peak. That was peak bloodline storytelling. But what ended the story of the Bloodline, or rather what became the beginning of the end of the Bloodline story, was WrestleMania 39. Night 1, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn defeated the Usos to become tag team champions. This sparked Roman Reigns to get so pissed off that he and Solo had to challenge for those tag titles. And unfortunately, Roman and Solo failed. This sparked the Bloodline Civil War between the Usos and Roman and Solo. However, it all came to an end. You guessed it. Earlier this year, on the Raw premiere on Netflix, inside the Intuit Dome here in my hometown of Los Angeles. Solo and Roman tribal combat. Excuse me. The moment Roman Reigns regained his Ulafala, and the moment that The Rock presented the Ulafala to Roman, was the moment we all knew it was indeed the end of the Bloodline. However, for Solo, it's only just beginning, because he obviously has his own faction, the MFTs, which features himself, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, Tala Tonga, and of course Jeff Cobb, aka JC Mateo, the MFTs, my family tree. Not sure if that is Bloodline 3.0 or what the fuck, but it is what it is. However, I will say that the Bloodline story was a great story told, because it tells the story of how much love and respect Paul Heyman has for the entire Anna White family. How Sami became friends with the Usos. It was basically multiple stories rolled up into one. And if anybody said if anybody tells you that the Bloodline story is not the greatest story ever told, they are liars. They are lying to you, people. They are lying. 100% the Bloodline, greatest story ever told. But if you feel like that there is a story, a storyline that should have been on this list, let me know down in the comments below, and let me know why. Let me know why in the comments below. And that'll do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more, WWE topic videos in the future, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and as always, make sure you guys are following me on all of my social media. All of my ads will be in the description below, as will the info to my fan mail. It will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.